Hey there riders, Moto Journo Kris here today, and I wanted to talk about the ergonomics of Yamaha's R7. Obviously this is a super sport style machine as far as the ergonomics, despite being a more road orientated machine in many ways, and that does mean you're getting rear sets, you're getting clip-on bars, so drop down bars. That does mean a tighter steering lock, where obviously how far the bars can turn are limited by the tank, and you're getting a screen, very much the sports bike style mirrors, which don't perhaps offer quite as much vision as you might be used to if you're coming from another style machine. But overall, it's kind of what you'd expect from a super sport style machine in many ways. 188 kilos on the scales, 835mm seat height, which again is very, very normal for the segment. 830 is probably about the average. And realistically speaking, this is a bike which fits me at 180 centimeters and 32-inch inseam very, very well. I'd say probably the only area which it isn't kind of ideal for me is that I find it a little bit harder than something like my Daytona 675 to lock in under the tank, but there are no stomp grips or anything like that on the bike, which would certainly be a welcome addition to the machine, I would say. So jumping on the bike, hopefully you can see here, again, as I said, 32-inch inseam, 180 centimeter rider. I'm sitting here on the bike. It's got a fairly aggressive seat to peg ratio. With that being said though, I haven't found myself getting cramped or anything like that. It works really well, and it does allow me to grab on to the bike very, very well. It's not quite as indented. It doesn't get quite as narrow at the tank there where I do grasp on as something like my Daytona 675, so I do find that a little bit wider than what I'm perhaps used to. However, grasping onto the bike is still relatively easy and certainly helps anchor you onto the bike. Now, for the general riding, you're probably going to be sitting something like this when you're not really having a go through the twisties. And again, I find that seating position nice and comfortable. I haven't got my arms straight. There's a little bit of bend at the elbows, and that does mean that I'm not locking onto the bike and getting all my weight through my arms, which obviously is a mistake. One of the things about this style of machine is obviously if you don't have the core and the back strength, once you get tired, you are going to drop all your weight onto the bars, and at that point it will become uncomfortable. But that is really a rider fitness issue, and so that's no different than any of the other more aggressive ergonomic style machines that are out there. All of them are the same, and generally speaking, with small variances, if you're struggling on a super sport style machine in that, you're going to struggle on all of them. Tucking in just like this will give you a better idea of kind of the, proper riding position if you're really having a go. At least a general one. I should probably get my toes right up on the pegs there. Again, I find this quite compact. It is comfortable. Again, obviously in this position, the drop down bars, everything just falls to hand. And for someone of my size, I've got plenty of room in the cockpit here, even though I don't have my helmet on, as you will notice. Reach to the ground as well is quite easy for me. It's fairly narrow at the front of the seat, which does make it a fairly easy reach to the ground for an 835mm seat height. I can get both feet down flat with a bit of room to spare, which I would say for me, again, at a 32-inch inseam is going to be a good benchmark for you, depending on your height and your leg length, most importantly, as far as getting the foot down. But I'd say certainly if you're a 30-inch inseam, while you may only be getting the front of a foot down or something like that, you should be able to do that on both sides, because it's not anywhere near as tall as I guess I expected it to be for an 835mm seat height, and I think that's because the bike is nice and narrow. The weight is carried very, very well as well, and I'll say that where I find a lot of the super sport style and the super bike style machines tend to feel a little bit heavy, I feel like the R7 is a little bit lighter in that regard. Talking about some of the adjustability, fully adjustable forks, preload and rebound adjustability on the rear, that'll give you a good bit of adjustability depending on your weight to try and get the bike dialed in for you, and that is nice to see as a standard kind of feature. You've got an adjustable lever on that front Brembo master cylinder. You don't have an adjustable clutch lever, so you will need to add one of those if you're struggling with the amount of reach you've got on those bars. Wind protection is good. I did find sitting up, depending on what helmet I was wearing, there were times where it was obviously kind of directing a bit more wind to hit my helmet in a way that perhaps the helmet designers had not really envisaged. But that is what it is for this style of bike. And by the same note, wearing a mesh jacket, sitting upright, obviously I get fairly good wind through the jacket. However, crouched right down more aggressively, you start to lose that wind flow through the jacket. And that is something just worth noting. But again, that's just the style of bike. You do have pillion pegs on the rear. It's got a very, very minuscule pillion seat here on the back. Certainly not something that I'd be probably spending a lot of time doing. I might take the wife on the back and get a little bit of an idea from her how she thinks that seating position is. But again, I think if you're buying this style of machine, probably the last thing you're worried about is pillion comfort for anything more than, say, a 5-minute trip down the road, or if you're giving a mate who's got a flat or something, a bit of a lift somewhere convenient. Talking again about locking in, obviously you've got a nicely molded area here under the tank as far as getting your leg in. It's not the deepest, so that does affect, for me, how easily I can lock into the bike. But with the rear set styles, I lock in quite easily. And when I do lock into the bike, I certainly notice that improves the whole suspension performance in realistic terms, because being locked into the bike, you're not getting bounced around anywhere near as much. I'll also say when I was crouched in, I was finding that quite natural when I was getting through some of the nicer roads, and I was being able to really just have a nice ride, tie all the corners together. And certainly once I was crouched right in, the amount of strain on my back and core and everything like that was pretty much gone, because you are just crouched right in and down, and just feels a lot more natural. And that's where these style of machines obviously are always going to be at their best. What else is there to mention? Probably not much. It's a compact seating position, fairly typical of a super sport style machine. The bike feels light. The 835mm seat height, I would say, for that seat height, has an easy reach to the ground. While obviously you do need to consider whether you're the kind of person who's going to enjoy this style of machine, I think it's probably worth a try if you're on the fence. However, it's important to note that this bike is more like a super sport style machine as far as the ergonomics of the bike, very much so. It is not like a 650 class bike, a lot of which have the taller bars on them to give you a more upright seating position. And also I don't think they've got quite as rear set foot controls. So definitely if you're considering an R7, I would say go jump on one, check one out in person. That's the most important thing you can do. However, this is my initial impressions. And again, as a 180cm rider, 32-inch inseam, and I do think from my observations that probably larger and smaller riders will still be able to really enjoy this machine and fit it quite well. Anyway, if you've got any questions, just let me know down below in the comments. As always, I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and you can support the channel on Patreon if you're enjoying the content.